One of the staples of The Simpsons is the travel episode. A common scenario is, hey, let's have the family go somewhere different. Take them out of Springfield, give them some new scenery to work with. And in the peak years, it often worked well as a kind of mix-it-up type episode. The first official travel episode of The Simpsons was Crepes of Wrath, an episode that I absolutely hate, but after that, when the show found its footing, it became a fixture in the show with at least one travel episode per season. By far, one of the greatest Simpsons travel episodes of all time is Bart vs. Australia, which is funny because, as you know, Season 6 is a season that I do have some resentment towards. It's a season that, personally, I think out of all the Prime seasons, is one of the least consistent ones, and quite possibly the weakest season between Seasons 3 and 9. Bart vs. Australia is completely exempt from that statement. People from Australia may not know this, but Westerners, at least Canadians, love Australians and their culture. They're like the cool version of the British. Australians are also kind of like colonial cousins to Canadians. Like, we got the cold ass country with the bears and the mountain lions and the wolves and shit, and you all got the hot country where you can't even live in the middle part of it and everything is poisonous. We will formally apologize for Nickelback when y'all apologize for Dad's Google history. The episode itself has a pretty funny starting plot. It all starts with a toilet. Bart and Lisa have this stupid game where they do like a bathroom product race and Bart keeps losing, causing Lisa to explain that the water wouldn't flush counterclockwise because they're north of the equator.
This line.
And I'd like to point out that my childhood died the day I found out that this is not how it works. But it does make for a good framing device, which then leads to Bart making multiple long-distance calls to countries south of the equator. The Antarctic Research Station where the toilet is frozen. I never realized bro was gonna go like pull one out in the bathroom with that adult magazine. I also think this might actually be the first thing I ever saw Hitler in. Like having Hitler in Argentina missing Bart's call, I was like, who's that? And my dad had to explain who Hitler was because of this episode.
Eine Minuten. Ach, das Wagenphone ist eine Nuisance-Phone. Buenas noches, mein Führer. Ja.
Oh, and a dude just dies by falling into lava. Bart finally gets the answer he's looking for when he speaks with a little Australian boy named Tobias, which causes him to rack up a huge phone bill for both ends. Basically, he tells the kid to go check the neighbors' houses, not realizing that, the neighbors are far away. There's something really funny about how Tobias gets on his little tricycle and leaves the phone off the hook to ride off to see his neighbors. And when he's come back, it's been hours. Again, I don't really know what Australia is like. I've never been to Australia, but I guess anywhere that's rural, you might not have actual neighbors who live within walking distance. The plot takes off when Bart causes an international incident with the call when he rips on Tobias's father.
You picked the wrong guy to tangle with here, mate.
I don't think so. You're all the way in Australia. Hey, I think I hear a dingo eating your baby.
Yeah, well, ooh!
And yes, I use dollary-doos as a name for currency. I said it.
$900 dues. Tobias!
Bart vs. Australia does have a lot of stereotypes about Australians, but The Simpsons itself is a show based on stereotypes. It's exaggerated, but it's tasteful. The idea that Bruno's member of parliament just lives across the way and then the prime minister is in the rough vicinity and sitting in a pool just kills me. I don't know why that's so funny. Maybe it's because there's that whole story with that one Australian PM who died swimming, but whatever. They paint Australia as this weirdly casual and unserious country, but in a world like The Simpsons, it's acceptable.
That's a bloody outrage, it is! I want to take this all the way to the Prime Minister! Hey! Mr. Prime Minister! Andy!
Aye, mate. What's a good word?
So this whole scenario is basically just uses the framing device to get the Simpsons to Australia. The basis of this is that now that Bart has caused an international incident with his insensitive remarks and the whole phone bill thing, Bart now has to make a public apology in Australia. The Evan Conover character is basically, it's just Phil Hartman. It's Phil Hartman doing a Lionel Hutz, but it's not really a Lionel Hutz type character, but it is. And in the midst of explaining why this is such a serious deal, he kind of gives a refresher on on a period of time in which America was obsessed with Australian culture. I would have just missed this being born in the early 90s, but I kind of remember some remnants of it. But in the 80s in the West, there was kind of an uptick in American fascination with Australian culture. This could be seen with like Crocodile Dundee and various merchandise that was popular at the time, as shown within Conover's little slideshow.
Oops, let's pretend we didn't see that.
So with that, basically Bart has to give an apology to Australia because the Australians, I guess, are supposed to be a little bit bitter that that whole Australia fad ended. Again, it's obviously satire. The whole Austrophilia thing came about when Australia was really trying to find its own identity for itself that wasn't tied to the UK or the US. I'm pretty sure, like, Crocodile Dundee kind of started this fad, but then it died with Yahoo Serious. Because, yeah, that movie he did, I really like the parts where they get to Australia, but I find that they spend so much time building up to it that they don't get a lot of time to really do it. But we do get some interesting characters. The bartender who gives Homer the giant beer and refuses to give Marge coffee.
I'll just have a cup of coffee.
Beer it is.
No, I said coffee.
Beer.
Cough-E.
B-ear.
C-O.
As well as a character who's basically just an Aussie version of the squeaky voice teen. And of course, there has to be a Crocodile Dundee parody.
You call that a knife? This is a knife.
That's not a knife, that's a spoon.
All right, you win. I see you've played knifey spoony before.
They touch all the bases here, the wildlife, the giant beers, although many Australians I've interacted with often say that Foster's is more of a beer marketed internationally than a popular beer in Australia, like depending on where you are. Like the beer that I know is popular in Australia is VB, but whatever. They probably used Foster's because Foster's had a lot of like advertising in the States during this whole Australian boom. The wildlife gags also make me laugh, like the koala just getting zapped and climbing up like nothing happened is a great visual gag. But overall, one of my favorite gags that I like laughed on the floor when I first saw was Homer being a dipshit at the US consulate and getting laid out by the Marine on duty.
Australia! America!
I get it, Dad.
America! Australia!
Homer,
America,
that's enough.
America! Australia!
Oh! Here in America, we don't tolerate that kind of crap, sir!
And to wrap up the toilet thing, which was the original start of this episode, they explain that the toilets do flush the other way, but the American consulate has this elaborate and loud device intended to combat homesickness. And that totally seems like something an American would do, like if they were in another country. Bart ends up at the courthouse to make a public apology as per the arrangement, and after apologizing, it's revealed that Australia actually has a unique form of corporal punishment in which someone is punished by being kicked in the rear end, in public, but with a giant boot. The reveal of the boot is an all-timer moment. It's something you don't expect because they play this whole thing relatively straight as a courtroom scene, and you don't really know what's gonna come out of it after Bart apologizes, and then it just takes this ridiculously cartoony turn. The Australian flag just having a giant boot with a bare ass on it is a great visual gag that kills me. Like, if there's any Aussies watching this, you gotta tell me if you've seen somebody actually flying this flag somewhere because of this episode. If I was Australian or I moved to Australia, I would proudly fly this flag.
What kind of a sick country would kick someone with a giant boot?
Mr. Simpson, shush. Disparaging the boot is a bootable offense. It's one of their proudest traditions.
Bart and Homer flee, with Homer hilariously holding the giant boot like it's a gun, and we get a quick reminder that, while The Simpsons is a cartoon, there is some realism when they realize they cannot just get away in kangaroo pouches.
We can get away in their pouches. Ew. It's not like in cartoons.
Yeah, there's a lot more mucus.
I love all the little Australian stereotypes you see chasing after The Simpsons. Like, my dad kind of marked out when he saw Wes from the Road Warrior there because he's like a huge Road Warrior fan. While this whole like international incident story is playing out, we get a few cutaway scenes of Marge and Lisa around Australia. They don't really have much of a B plot, but we get a little funny gag where they're in a gift shop and Lisa wants a didgeridoo, but Marge wants her to settle for some dumb touristy hat. Oh, and earlier in the episode, Bart for some reason brought his frog, which honestly I'm gonna kind of divert here. This is a weird one because this frog is the forgotten Simpsons pet. The frog first appears, appropriately enough, in Grapes of Wrath, and then they just never really reference the frog again until he inexplicably brings the frog to Australia. And obviously the frog is female because it gives birth and the frogs start to kind of ruin the country. According to the Simpsons wiki, this frog is either Froggy, who appears in Grapes of Wrath, or a completely different frog named Bart Jr., who is listed as appearing in this episode, and Girls Just Want to Have Sums from season 17. Both frogs are listed as appearing in this episode, but nevertheless, it's a pet that was given to Bart and only managed to appear 2 to 3 times in the entire series run. But hey, because of this episode, I sometimes refer to frogs as Chazwazzers.
We have them in America. They're called bullfrogs.
What? That's an odd name. I'd have called them Chazwazzers.
And then we get our climax, where Bart decides to take the kick in the ass, but then dodges at the last minute, and they do a whole Fall of Saigon type thing when the Australians burst into the American consulate, only to realize that the bullfrogs have completely destroyed their agricultural sector. Oddly dark that the Simpsons show up in Australia and completely fuck the country up, but it's played for laughs.
Hey, look! Those frogs are eating all their crops!
Oh, and the koala gets a menacing ending with a stinger to close the episode. This is one of the premier travel episodes in the show, and admittedly, I'm not the biggest fan of Simpsons travel episodes. They seem rather gimmicky most of the time. There are the standout travel episodes, but there's a lot of them where I'm just like, and skip it. This is not one of those episodes. Despite my reservations with season 6, it's undeniable that Bart vs. Australia and Itchy and Scratchy Land, the other travel episode of the season, are actually 2 of the GOATs when it comes to Simpsons travel episodes. I don't know which one I like better, but it's not a comparison. Now, I'd like to use this to kind of reference something that some fans may not realize, is that Australia has a relatively sizable and loyal Simpsons fan base, and a lot of them seem to love this episode due to Australia being featured as a major plot point. However, when this episode was initially released, while many Australian fans understood that The Simpsons is an American satire and that this was all just for humor, many Australian viewers were offended by what was depicted on the show and considered some of the stereotypes to be unflattering. The episode was even discussed in Australian Parliament in an unflattering light. However, the episode's cultural relevance still stands today, with the petition once being made to change the name of Australian currency to dollary-doos, and many fans from Australia love the episode. I remember when I was a kid, we had a neighbor who was from Australia, and my dad was asking him what he thought about, certain depictions of Australia in Western media. He said that Crocodile Dundee was an embarrassment to the country, but when my dad brought this episode up, he got super hyped and was like, "The boot!" He loved this shit. So I think the outrage around this episode is just a bunch of sissy-ass whiners with no sense of humor. It's also worth noting that this episode did get a follow-up. I only learned this recently, through some people posting it on Twitter, but they made a short video that acted as a sequel to this episode that was shown as part of an attraction at the Fox Backlot Studios theme park in Australia. It's basically a 3-minute short where the family visits Bruno and Tobias. It reruns some of the gags from this episode and some other Simpsons episodes, and it ends with Homer blowing the country up. I just think it's kind of fun to mention this because it's the Tobias character, who at this point in the Simpsons shitposting community is a very popular character, actually did appear in more than one thing. Now, if I had to rate Bart vs. Australia out of 10, I would give it a 7 out of 10. It's a high average. It's funny, it's paced well, and has some of the most memorable gags in the series, but it's not one of the super standout episodes in the series. It's noteworthy in that it has a lot of really memorable gags and holds a special place in the heart of Australian Simpsons fans, from what I can tell. Which is a lot better than I can say about the episode they did that took place in Toronto, but I'll get to that later. Its only flaws are that, despite being funny, it still does rely on a gimmick, something that would plague the show heavily as the seasons went on. But Bart vs. Australia is never a skip episode. So what are your thoughts on Bart vs. Australia? Let me know in the comments, and honestly, why don't you guys comment some episodes you'd like to see me take a look at? I can't guarantee that I'll get to all of them, but I could use a little guidance. Nevertheless, if you like this video, hit that like button, drop me a comment, and hit that subscribe button, and thank you for watching.
Did you accept a 6-hour collect call from the States?
It was an emergency call from the International Drainage Commission in Springfield.
Oh my God! There's nothing wrong with the bidet, is there?